I got booted off of my recording, so I'm gonna go back just a little bit. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder, not wanting to pathologize um, the menstrual cycle. However, there are those individuals who have really intense um, uh, PMS symptoms or menstrual cycles that cause either personal distress. So to them, they have a really hard time with it, or it's causing distress at home, at work. And so this one is entirely based on the time before the menstrual cycle starts, and then things improve as the menstrual cycle kind of ends, or as the period ends. So now we're going to switch gears to the bipolar disorders. Um, let's see here. So bipolar 1. I struggled so much trying to remember the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. It's just one of those things that I could not get. So um, after years and years, I finally got it cemented. So bipolar 1, main ingredient. They got to have at least one manic episode, right? Most clients with bipolar 1 will have also had major depression. They don't need it though. The main ingredient, the yes or no, is this bipolar 1 or not, is the presence of a manic episode. Now, bipolar 2, two ingredients. One is at least one, and now my mouse isn't here, at least one hypomanic episode, right? Because if it's manic, it's bipolar 1. Hypomanic and one major depressive episode. Cyclothymic disorder is just like persistent depressive disorder, except it's a version of bipolar. So this is where the person has some ups and downs. They don't go all the way up to even hypomanic. They don't go all the way down to major depressive episode. They go up and down for 2 years, for a longer period of time. So this is someone who might get categorized or labeled as they're moody, they're wishy-washy, they're really sensitive, things like that. But again, this is over 2 years, causes impairment, and it's really easy to maybe just label it as that's just how they are, and certainly there are people who are sensitive and things like that, or who are moody. But this is, again, it's causing a problem, and subjectively, your client would probably report feeling like I'm not in control of my mood, and it's just some days I wake up and I'm great or really angry, and other days I have no energy, and it seems to go back and forth a lot. And we kind of covered this. So let me switch now. Here we go. Here's our dysthymia. Let's break down another one. All right, and if you feel comfortable, great. If otherwise, I'm just going to review one or two other diagnoses just so everybody has an idea of how the DSM looks. Persistent depressive disorder, or dysthymia, there's the name. These are the codes, right? Now, for the class, I'm less interested in the codes. If you're billing for insurance, that's what these are. The DSM code is this one, and the one in parentheses is the ICD, the International Classification of Diseases. That's their code. So if you were to type, like, Google ICD F34.1, it's going to say persistent depressive disorder. Our criteria: depressed mood for most of the day, for more days than not, for at least 2 years. Notice these little notes, and this is very much a devil's in the detail type situation. In children and teens, the mood can be irritable, and the duration must be at least 1 year, right? So little details here and there. And the presence of the following while depressed of 2 or more: appetite, or poor appetite, overeating, the the sleep stuff, energy stuff, low self-esteem, feelings of hopelessness, and poor concentration. During 2 years, there's never been a manic episode, right? So if there is a manic or hypomanic episode, you don't consider this anymore. Not explained by the following disorders, not due to substance, medication, or medical condition, has caused impairment in the person's life. Specify, does it have these other things that we talked about, the anxious distress, the mixed features, the remission status, early onset, before 21, late onset, after 21. Specify, was it just pure dysthymia? Was it persistent major depressive episode, intermittent major depressive episode, mild, moderate, severe? Diagnostic features. So usually what I do is when I think there's a disorder to be made or a diagnosis to be made, I'll look at the criteria. And a lot of times I'll look at it and say to myself, I don't know what that means. So then I read the diagnostic feature and it tells you. And see how this one is significantly shorter than depression, right? Prevalence, the development and course, the risk. Here's our differential diagnosis. Major depressive disorder, psychotic disorders. So here's a good one. Psychotic disorders are like schizophrenia, or delusional disorders like hearing things, seeing things, believing things that are outlandishly untrue, like having a delusion. Depressive symptoms are commonly associated with psychotic disorders. However, psychotic disorders would also have things like hallucinations and delusions. Comorbidity. And that's how the diagnoses are kind of laid out. Let's see if we can find another one here. Notice that one didn't have all the sections. It didn't have like a cultural section, and that's why I say don't rely only or solely on the DSM for cultural things. And let's see, the last thing I'll pull up. Where is it? Let's see. Here we go. Other specified depressive disorders. So this is what used to be called not otherwise specified. These are short lists, right? So this category, and I'm just reading right here, this category applies to presentations in which symptoms of a depressive disorder, etc., are present, but do not meet the full criteria for any of the disorders in the depressive disorders. So maybe it's someone who has had, they had a major depressive episode, right? They're all the way down, no energy, I can't get out of bed, I wish I were dead, I'm miserable, there was no extenuating circumstance, there's none of that cultural stuff. So we look at it and we see, well, we obviously know that's not depression, right, or the major depressive disorder, because that episode was too short. We know it's not dysthymia because you need the 2 years. So what is it? Because you as a clinician are saying, this has caused my client some really big relationships. There's been consequences. There's impairment. So what is it? Well, it could be recurrent brief depression, short duration depressive episodes, right? So these are some extra things. The reason that they're not put up with all the other ones separately is that these are either A, much, much less common, so you don't see them often at all. In fact, I don't think in my 12-ish years, I've ever seen one from these categories in any disorder. And B, they are typically, because they're not prevalent, they're less researched. And then unspecified depressive disorders. And both of these are in each section of the DSM. This is where you, again, in your clinical judgment, you're saying this person has, this is a depressive disorder. Like, all the symptoms scream to me, this is a depressive issue, but they don't meet the criteria for any of the existing diagnoses, or you are choosing to not specify, right? You are withholding something for one reason or another. And this has been a point of discussion, and that's one that we'll go into in the live class about these. That's going to do it for this episode. Page 184 has those specifiers in more detail. As you can see, there's the anxious distress, and you need all of that. Look this over. Hopefully breaking down the DSM that way makes it a little more palatable, a little bit easier to understand. And then we will review it some more when we meet, and we'll review it each time. Now that I've got this handy electronic version of it, we will go over it in our live sessions and kind of look at whatever questions or concerns y'all have, and hopefully I'll be able to fill in any gaps. I hope everyone is doing well, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.